And we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to yet another episode of the Greyhorn Pagans podcast. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today Miss Georgina Rose. Georgina, introduce yourself to the
Hey,
good people.
I am Georgina Rose. I host a podcast called Postmodern Iconoclast. I'm a YouTuber. I'm all over social media. I'm a perennialist, a polytheist, and I basically just talk about religion, esoterica, and culture.
Awesome. The reason why I asked you on is because I myself and with my tribe were diving a little deeper into mysticism, and I saw that you are a Thelemite as well, a
Yes.
follower of
Yeah.
Crowley.
Yeah, spent a lot of time
That's
in that sphere. It's not how I often like lead introduce myself at this point, but it is something I've been
fair
involved with
enough.
for a long time. I think my general thoughts on Thelema is it's a very good mysticism system. I think that um, I disagree with a little bit of what it advocates for at times, but I think the actual practical mysticism that it teaches is really good and applicable to a lot of different systems. I'm very mysticism oriented in my sort of worldview and practice. It's a key part of what I do and what I talk about. I find it very interesting. It's
Mhm.
kind of how I got into like the polytheism, paganism stuff was through that kind of like spirituality, mysticism sort of path. And then I sort of came into paganism, polytheism with time. And yeah,
Oh, that's interesting. Like usually, what I see is that it's the other way around. People get introduced to paganism first, and then start seeing the mystic side of things. But that's quite controversial because Crowley was a very controversial figure. Like
yeah, that's a word for it. He was polarizing. I feel like at the same time, though, if he wasn't so polarizing, people wouldn't be talking about him today.
that's
So
very
in a
much true.
sense, I guess becoming infamous kind of helped his project in a funny way. But he was a provocateur. That's probably a good word for it. He said a lot of just very incendiary stuff. But when you look into what he actually wrote and what he actually like taught, it's not as crazy as sort of he can sound when he was doing his kind of front facing stuff. I think of him as like sort of the original troll in a lot of ways. Like he was a bit of a troll and he had some fun with the media, but fundamentally what he teaches is this very will oriented system of practical mysticism. That's really what it is when you get down to it.
Yeah. Were you raised religious, or is it something that you have discovered yourself? Like I myself, my parents were raised religious, but always left me to find my own path, which became Germanic paganism or North European paganism. So what's your story? How did you get to where you are now, where you are today?
Yeah, so my family was like somewhat religious. I wouldn't say they're super religious. They weren't really, really intense about it. But they were Episcopals, which is a type of Christianity. It's the American version of Anglicanism, which is what it's called over in Europe.
Mhm.
And they were like religious, like we went to church, but they were never, super, super intense about it. And I always kind of had questions, like as a child, like I would like ask the like youth leaders like all my
Yeah.
annoying questions because there were things that I was just like, this doesn't quite make sense to me. Kind of like I always had questions, and so it never really was something that clicked with me. And then like I started exploring religion, and funnily enough, my path into this stuff was kind of a little unconventional because I was actually doing like self improvement stuff. Like I was trying to do a bunch of self improvement, and
Mhm.
like looking into like self help, self betterment, like all that type of stuff. Like I guess now it'd be called like the wellness realm or whatever. And I was
Yeah.
like, this is not enough. I was like, I'm seeing spiritual threads in this. I'm seeing religious threads in this. But I got this sense that a lot of that was like watered down something else. And I was like, no, I want to know what this actually is. And so I went like, sure you guys have been to like the bookstores where they have that like self, mind, body, spirit, like
Yeah. the mindfulness.
Pagan books are put, but it always is like some weird euphemism title, like mind, body, spirit. And I started, reading books, and I was like, this makes a lot of sense. And then I started experimenting with it. I was really into like mysticism, occultism stuff originally. And this is the thing, I was like doing the ritual type stuff, but I didn't have like a real theological explanation for things. I was just like, this is working, so I'm going to keep doing it. And then I was like, well, there must be some theology to this, right? Like there must be some sort of metaphysics. And so then I started looking into like metaphysics and like understandings of the world and how this stuff works. And I was like, okay, this is intriguing to me. And I sort of fell down this rabbit hole and ended up where I am now. I've been involved with this stuff for a while now. It's been over 6 years or something like that. I don't know. It's been a hot minute. And with time, like my views have definitely changed. My path has definitely changed, but I'm sort of content where I am now. And I guess it's kind of, we all get into it somehow. I feel like there's a number of ways people kind of enter this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always something, and I am glad I've come to this stuff. I find that there's a lot of truth to it, and it's bettered my life in a lot of ways. I kind of got that self-improvement that I was looking for, just not in the way I thought I would get it, but that's how things tend to go, I guess.
Yeah, true. I see that a lot with the kind of books that you're talking about. It is indeed very watered down and like too much focus, like it just, in my opinion, too much focus on being love and light and all, and that's where I struggle with it a lot, because I've always had a more or like a stronger affinity too with the darker side. It's more powerful, more interesting to me. So when everybody's all kumbaya and love and light and just focusing on spiritual growth through the light, and I can't get into it, and a lot is watered down as well, and especially now with, of course, the whole influencer culture. People are just doing it for a quick buck. And it's funny because you mentioned that like the whole path going down, that I believe that's now sort of a trend on Twitter to like how do you get where you are now. And you'll see interesting things, like people going from religious to atheist, and all of a sudden pagan. It's so
there's definitely a phenomenon of these people who kind of like ideology hop and like convert their beliefs really frequently, which that does happen sometimes. Like people have pretty strong shifts in what they think. I've had it happen a few times. I feel like at least once in your life you should have like a existential framework crash. But there are definitely some people who it's like every week they are an entirely different religion. And I feel like part of that is people, like most of them I think have to be younger. Like I think a lot of them are people just kind of confused or whatever, which it happens, but it is interesting to watch. In terms of those books, yeah, they are watered down, and the love and light stuff, it's unbalanced. It's not a realistic view at the world. And in a sense, it's kind of an anti-pagan view, because if we're talking about like back to nature paganism, within nature there is like the flowers, but there's also like there's a feralness to nature. There's this kind of darker quality to it, right? It's a lot more nuanced and complicated than I think it sometimes gets portrayed as. And I think a lot of the popular pop paganism, whatever you want to call it, pushed by like the influencer crowd, I don't know what to call it. It's like its own religion at this point. It's almost like its own thing. I feel like I need to give them like ism, because it is like a clear ideology that they have, but it's not really what original paganism was. It's simplified and love and lightified. And if you're going to try to make money off it, right, like you have to make it somewhat buyable and consumer friendly in a sense. And a lot of what paganism is, like if you read the actual myths, you read the logos, all that, it's not exactly that. I think there's also a complication with the kind of neo-spiritual new age stuff and the pagan intersection, because I think there is, unfortunately, an intersection between the two. And so you get these concepts kind of blending into each other in a way that it's like people will be talking about paganism, but they're kind of not talking about paganism. They're talking about something else, If you want to talk about that, something else, you want to talk about New Thought, you want to talk about Theosophy, I mean, go do that, but that's not paganism. So I think there's some confusion there. I think a lot of people, you know, paganism has become a really big tent term. It's become a really broad term. Like, I mean, someone calling themselves a pagan could mean like a bunch of different things. And it's, I mean, even within academia, I was talking with this religious academic who does a YouTube channel a while ago. And I was asking her, like, okay, so how do you guys actually define pagan? Because I've been trying to be like, okay, what is the definitive definition or whatever? She's like, well, we kind of debate that. And so there's that level, I think, to it too, right?
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. Like there is this whole group, like I like to call them TikTok Vikings, you know, with the shaved sides and, you know, calling them like with the last name Lothbrok at it or whatever and being all badass and to Valhalla. And I mean, you know, they're funny just because it's so incredibly incredibly cringe. Uh, but unfortunately, those are the ones often setting the tone for paganism, for heathenism, because I mean they are, well, pretty much the loudest, and because they are so incredibly cringe, and take, you know, series like Vikings, they take it as, you know, as gospel almost. Um, it's hard to differentiate from those, and the whole new wave, like the you have like so many spiritual influencers who, like, through TikTok, I mean, there was this one guy, like with eyes just very very white, his eye whites like very very white. You know, there's a reason you're here, like the universe has led you to this exact moment, and this is, you know, what you're supposed to learn. And it's those cringe people that give spirituality, that give paganism, I mean, not necessarily a bad name, but people tend to don't take it seriously because of those kind of people, because of those, well, who a lot of them eventually become influencers. And I think that's a shame, because there's so much to be learned. I mean, there is a pagan revival going on. I mean, still small, but people are, you know, they are indeed questioning. They are questioning the world, questioning what the hell is going on. And a lot of churchgoers as well. And I mean, church, of course, doesn't like that, because you're supposed to listen, not ask questions.
Oh yeah, I mean, I've been following, like, basically trying to track the rise of paganism pretty intensely. I've been analyzing Google Trends. I've been analyzing like a bunch of religious demographic surveys. I have like a whole file of my computer, like compiling it and like seeing where it's gone up and what's gone down, and what parts of paganism are the ones that are growing and what are falling. Been tracking this really intensely for a couple years now, and we are increasing. 100%. The numbers are going up actually really fast. We're having really quick growth, essentially, is what's happening. And sort of it's been going on for the past decade. In 2020 is when it really sped up. Well, late 2019, early 2020. I noticed like that's where it started increasing. And that does correlate with some social media tags getting bigger, because I've been tracking those as well because I'm insane. Um, and it definitely, this is the thing, these social media types definitely get at attention. But I've noticed the people who get in through these social media ones, they tend to peel off pretty quick. What happens is like they get into it when it spikes online, because it goes like up and down, right? But it's basically what the graphs look like is it's like up, down, but it's progressively moving up, right? That's kind of how the pagan demographics are going. And there's certain times of the year when we see influxes of people, I've noticed. And certain times are slower. It's on a very interesting cycle in terms of like hits and interest. But yeah, it does. Those influencer people bring people in, but a lot of them peel off, but some of them do stay. And I find that the ones that do stay, because I've been monitoring social media so religiously, they tend to sort of move away from that and get more serious with time. So that's at least a good thing. I find a lot of people who get into it for the aesthetic or for being like masculine Viking man archetype, like
Yeah.
a lot of them do end up peeling off. I've also noticed some of them end up like converting to another religion too. Like it's interesting, but we are on the upswing. I know a really interesting survey came out of Cornwall like earlier this week, where paganism is number 3 on their religious,
Saw that.
which is that's crazy. I mean, we're behind. That means we're behind Islam, which is that's pretty good in terms of getting people in. And what's interesting about those two being next to each other is Islam's numbers are rising not because of converts, because of the birth rate. Like that's why. Whereas with
Yeah.
paganism, it's a convert rate. Like most people who get into paganism are converts, not born in. If you look at like the little bit of data we have on that, so it means that we are actually pulling people in through genuine conversion and through people actually developing a real interest, which I think is good and optimistic. I hope the numbers keep going up with pagan interest.
Yeah, big time.
And I think this is the thing. If you get into this stuff through those like kind of Viking cringe people and you get into it for long enough, you're eventually going to mature past it, I feel like. For most people, of course, there are some who do not. But I feel like, you know, once you know enough, once you're really in this, you're really living it, you're honoring all the holidays and all that. I feel like you kind of mature in your spirituality to some extent. Like I have more cringe for people who don't mature in their spirituality versus people who are new and are being cringe. You know what I mean? Like, it's just,
I mean, we've all been that cringy pagan, you know, sharing the I'd rather be a wolf of Odin than, you know.
the best, I will say the best cringy, if you're going to do one of the cringe posts, it's the one about the hammer and the nail. Have you seen it?
Oh, yeah, I believe what you I know which one you mean. It's yeah. I've actually been talking with a good friend of mine about that. He is a a diehard Christian. He's sometimes
Yeah.
late for workout or late in the dojo because, you know, church service
Yeah.
runs late. And what I have noticed, what he has noticed, is that a lot of people aren't necessarily pagan as much as they are just anti-Christ and calling themselves pagan. And I think if anything, those are like the cringe pagans I can handle. But if you're calling yourself pagan purely because you have some sort of vendetta against Christianity or Catholicism, you're in the wrong. And
I
you
agree. I actually
sorry.
wrote a Substack about this forever ago. It's probably been like 6 months. I wrote this like rant on Substack about this phenomenon. I think it was like we need to move past anti-Christianity or whatever. And this is the thing. I think there's a place for criticizing Christianity. I'm not a Christian for a reason. I like the Nietzschean critique of Christianity. I think there's a lot of truth to that specific critique of Christianity. That's the one that I like the most. But beyond that, I mean, this is the thing. If you let anti-Christianity define your spirituality and define your paganism, this is the thing. Your paganism is just a reaction. And what happens is if your paganism is centered around not being Christian, you end up just taking all the positions that Christianity doesn't hold. And fundamentally, you are still locked into this Christian worldview, right?
Yeah.
Like if all your religious positions are, I am not what Christianity is, all your positions are just inverse Christianity, which funnily enough, I've met people like this. I've met them in real life, I've met them online, I've interacted with some. They end up really believing a lot of the same thing as Christians. They just like take it in the opposite way. And fundamentally, I don't even think there's that big of a difference between them and Christians, right? I think like for me, my worldview does not come from my thoughts on Christianity. I came to my worldview because I think it's true. Do I have thoughts on Christianity? Yeah, I don't hate Christians. I have disagreements that many people I'm close to in my life are Christians. I don't like a lot of my close friends in real life are Christians, and I think that's fine. Like they're great people. I enjoy spending time with them. But it's just this is the thing. I disagree with Christianity. I don't have like some hatred or animosity towards it because I don't know. It's just it's if it's not your religion, I don't know. I guess if you have some personal, really bad experience, I kind of get like if something really awful happened. I mean, okay, yeah, there are circumstances like that. But in general, it's just, I feel like we should move past it and not let our paganism be defined because of what Christianity is not, because that's where we get some of the things in paganism that I've been really vocal critics of. And that would be like one specific thing that I think is literally just an anti-Christianity idea, is the idea that like virtue and morality like isn't a thing in paganism. You see this a lot in like the influencer crowd. I'm serious. Like the influencers
Really?
be like, yeah, they have like these really bizarre views on like karma, like I mean, they don't believe any idea like that exists. Like they just like they don't believe in any concept of virtue, and it's something I've been like hounding them on for like 3 months now, and I've gotten into like many Twitter slap fights over this, and I'm like, that's just anti-Christianity. A lot of the ideas that are even virtues within Christianity were by people like Plato, who were pagan. Like
Yeah.
a lot of our cultural norms and values are actually, if you look back, they're from ancient Greece, and those people were pagan. They were not Christian. And so I think you get these really bizarre positions if you're just an anti-Christian pagan that don't even align with what pagans actually thought, because we know to some extent what pagans actually thought about the world. I mean, obviously we don't have the amazing records that we wish we had, but we can get a grasp of what they thought. And it's not, they don't, this thing, they don't disagree with Christianity on absolutely everything. Obviously they disagree theologically, but like, I don't know, the idea that they're just polar opposites is silly, because I mean, a lot of like, and the thing is, a lot of people I think even know that, because they'll go after the like Christianity syncretizing pagan aspects and like point this out a lot. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. Sorry for ranting a little bit. I get
No,
that.
you're absolutely right, and I've actually been talking about that a lot lately. That like every religion takes things from other religions, especially when they, when they take over. Yeah, Christianity adopted a lot of things from paganism, but it makes for easier conversion, and like all the Abrahamic religions, they are basically the same, just written down in a slightly different way. And another thing that I wanted to ask is I thought it was interesting that you mentioned that at like the end of 2019, beginning 2020, we all know what happened like worldwide
Yeah.
in that time. Would you say that the like the rise in paganism, in spirituality, is because as humanity collectively, we were just thrown into a dark night of the soul and kind of forced to reevaluate things and look at the world around us, see what's going on, because those were brutal times.
Oh, 100%. I actually, during that period, I spoke with a guy from the Financial Times about this. I got interviewed by them, and I was like, no, there's a direct correlation. Even historically, if you look at when religion's interest has surged, it's primarily been during hard times. And I think that period was one that did, because no matter who you are, no matter what you think, that was a hard period. Like, you know what I mean? Like everyone was kind of suffering then. I mean, a lot of people, a lot of bad stuff happened. Like it's
Yeah,
pretty terrible. And I think a lot of people, they had, I mean, well, one, they had more free time, so they had more time to think about this stuff, right? Because of like mass layoffs and remote work, or whatever. People had just had more time. When you have more
yeah,
time, you know, try things out and experiment. But it was also that internal dark night of the soul, right? Like I think people find spirituality a lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time when they're not doing so great, right? Like if you're doing perfectly great in life all the time, unless you're like a nerd, like probably both of us, right? You're probably not thinking about these huge, massive questions all the time. But if you're like a normie and you have something really terrible happen, you're going to have to think about this stuff, and you're going to probably
yeah,
get more existential, right? And I think that it makes sense that paganism would surge when that happened. And I also think paganism specifically was the one that a lot of people were going to for a reason related to that time. And that would be that a lot of people couldn't go outside and be with nature in the way they wanted to, right? We were all really alienated. Like I know everything was on Zoom, and you know what I mean? Like
yeah,
we were all like hyper forced to be on the internet essentially to like communicate with anyone essentially, right?
yeah,
I guess unless you do one of those like living pods. This thing in my city, people who like all liked each other, like lived together and
mm,
like shared living with their friends or whatever. But like if you weren't doing that, like you had to see all your friends on the computer, and it was, everyone was so pulled out of normalcy. God, it was not fun. I did rough time.
Oh yeah.
And people, I think, wanted to return to nature. I think that I think to some extent, people just hated having to be online all the time. They wanted to go back to nature. And I think that's why paganism in particular appealed. And so I think all those factors together was kind of a perfect storm. I mean, other religions had surges of interest during this period as well. It wasn't just paganism. In general, people became more religious, which I think makes sense. But
yeah, definitely. But
I would say.
I
And
think
the stats, if you look at paganism, like even like Google search stats, the spikes are crazy. Like in that period, like the spike was like really, really high. The numbers are wild if you look at them.
I think it's interesting that like Christianity, Catholicism, especially here in Europe, they still have a very big role to play. But you also saw online a lot churches with banners like Jesus is not gonna save you from COVID, just get the vaccine and all. And I think that put a lot of people off as well, and maybe started looking for for alternatives, for other things. And the thing with nature, like they do say, absence makes the heart grow fonder. And like here in the Netherlands, it was we never really had a hard lockdown. You were still allowed to go outside, and like if anything during that time I was outside more than in years before or since, actually. So I think it's really interesting. You could say that nature calls and calls you back. And I think because you are or were spending so much time on the internet, you had the opportunity to do a lot of research, and a lot of deeper research as well. I mean, like if you're online anyway and you feel the call, you hear the call, of course you're gonna go looking for things. And yeah, dark times, a lot of people will indeed go to religion to help them like get out the dark, or at least find some sort of light. And like it was a wake-up call for a lot of people. And do you think that how do I put this, that it had the opposite effect of what was trying to be achieved? They were locking us in, locking us up, but like in the end we kind of freed ourselves, freed our minds.
I can say that kind of happened. I think that's an optimistic way to look at it. I think it's a good way to frame it. I mean, I live in an urban center in the United States. I'm in a very urban area, so our lockdown was really intense. It was a major one, and it was pretty prolonged. And this is the thing. Like, I think there was that, right? I think a lot of people did. I mean, it was a hard time. I think a lot of people did find growth out of it at the very least. If it's I guess the nice spin we can put on it, right? Like, in a way, I think people finding paganism is kind of a freeing of their mind in a number of ways. I think that it's a practice and tradition that it is kind of contrary to a lot of what is commonly held as beliefs now. And I think that paganism challenges a lot of those conceptions and beliefs in a way that is really useful and helpful and, in a sense, truthful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and still there are a lot of people too. I mean, I don't know if they are like just on the internet or like they act that way in real life too, who still push for the jab and push for the whole mask thing and whatever. And if anything, started indeed seeing science or religion of science as their religion, and like the government as God. Like, do you think those people, like, just do you think there's still hope for them, or is it like, do you see like a real like the schism like only becoming bigger between the people who have woken up, who are questioning things, and the people who, you know, keep pushing the same stuff that has been pushed for numerous years now.
Yeah, no matter your views on what religion or politics or whatever, I mean, everyone in a sense kind of has a religion in a way. Like, even if you are secular, I believe that a lot of secular ideologies are fundamentally religions in a sense. And people develop the same kind of zealotry that you would for religion for whatever secular ideology you're in. You can see it on many sides of ideological aisles, right? Like, if you don't have a god or something like that, something else is going to replace that, because fundamentally we are tribal people and we want some sort of explanation for life, right? Everyone wants a meaning and a purpose and a will. Every person. And I think people who are not into paganism, not into Christianity, not in any of that, they find it in something else. And I think there are some, like even Christians and stuff, who their religion is not really Christianity, it's some secular ideology, right? I think that people need a framework to understand the world, right? Everyone needs, because of the way our brains work, I think we want to box things and have explanations and like tie ribbons and things, right? And I think the world, a lot of people, they need something for that. And so they find something. Like, I think that they always find an ideology that is their theology, whether that's a religion or a politics or a certain like political party or a government, or there are a lot of ways it can go down. I mean, I think that paganism is a much more positive framework to live in than, I don't know, any of these many ones. And I think they all produce, I mean, people need reasons for things. They need explanations, right? It's very difficult to be a person and feel as if you don't understand the world. I think that that creates a lot of really big internal pain for people. And so they're going to latch on to something, right? I think that maybe they'll change their views, maybe they won't. I mean, who knows, right? People change all the time. People's views change, I mean, all the time. But people need something. I really think they do. And I think that a lot of these secular ideologies have stepped in the place that religion held. And I think that might be the future if, I mean, atheism really does take hold in the way that many people theorize it will. Some other ideology will take its spot. People need a reason for things. They just do, right?
Yeah. No, that's very much true, and it's, you know, it's clear for all to see, and but like in the like at least in the Roman times, you had you know, people like Julius Caesar who eventually, you know, like he was a politician, but you know, became Caesar, became the emperor, and eventually rose up to, well, godhood. And you know, maybe there are some remnants of that left because people are still like, at least from, you know, from the outside looking into America, there are people are still very much clinging to politicians. I actually had a like a talk about that just last night, or well, this morning, technically, because it was like 5 a.m. for me. That people, like, they need a hero. They really want someone to come and save them, and that is still very much a remnant of Christianity, of the Abrahamic religions. And I mean, in paganism, yeah, we look up to our gods, and you know, we try to please our gods, but we don't look at them to save us. So do you think that, you know, since history does repeat itself, is there gonna be another Julius Caesar? Is there gonna be another Alexander the Great who just, well, quite literally takes up the sword, or you know, puts on the laurel crown and actually does help us? Or are we just left to save ourselves?
I think in a sense, I mean, on an individual level, you have to have the will to save yourself. I think you need to have will. You need to have, you need to not feel reliant, I feel like is a good word for it. Will someone come in and save society? I mean, possibly. I think there's a weird void of power right now in a lot of ways. Like, I think that, I mean, I'm in America, right? We're in a very weird transitionary period, I would say. Like, a lot of America is declining in a sense. I think that's like we are really in a state of like geopolitical decline. We're having inflation, all this stuff. And so I think if there was someone who wanted to take on a sword or a loyal and step in, this would be a great time for them to do it. Because I mean, we do get really culty around specific politicians here in a way that I don't think is productive. I feel like politicians, we should be critical of them and not assume they have our best interest at heart, because a lot of the times they do not.
That much is obvious.
Yeah, but maybe someone will. I mean, I don't entirely know. I think that we should, as individuals, always remember that what matters most is our gods and our will and saving ourselves in a sense. But I don't know. Maybe someone will step in. If someone is going to step in and fix society, I mean, I that would be nice. I'll support it if someone is able to do it. Don't know how optimistic I am, but I'm not fully in the black pill side either.
Okay, well, good. That's at least someone who isn't fully black pilled yet. Because from what I'm seeing, we're heading for another great reset, and it's already been kicked off, and there are people standing up to to be a savior. Like even here in the Netherlands, we have politicians. Funny enough. But they're all, how do I put it? Like they present themselves to be a savior, and in America, like people still talk about him worldwide. Basically, Trump did a really good job of setting himself up to be the hero with the whole QAnon stuff. Like how much faith would you like do you have in that? Do you think that like are they all bad, or are there some good people here and there, or is it just one basket of rotten apples?
This is the thing. I think when we talk about people who want to be politicians, we're talking about people who want power. And fundamentally, if you are someone who believes that you can be a politician who saves the world through power and stuff, there's a little bit of narcissism that's implicit in taking on that goal in life, right? Like if you are someone who wants that amount of power, because when you're a politician, you have a lot of power, there's a bit of narcissism and Machiavellianism that's going to come in with that. Like even if you are the best person ever or the worst person ever, like to be like, I have the ability to fix society, I have the ability to lead a country. I mean, there's a level of kind of dark triad traits you're going to implicitly hold to have, the guts to do that. Same with like most really successful people as well, right? Like all that stuff is kind of linked. I think there are people who do get into politics and stuff with good intentions. So like, I do think there are people who really do want to fix things, right? I think that a lot of people do. I don't think many people either are just fully like pure evil, right? I think most people are complicated, right? I think even the people who are just like kind of bought out corrupt politicians, I mean, they still probably have some genuine convictions, you know what I mean? So I don't know, it's complicated. Politics is tricky, and fixing the world is a monumental task. I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like I know in the States there's very much or it should be at least very much a separation between church and state, but as we're seeing religion or spirituality is very beneficial for a lot of people, and I'm actually finishing up with Pagan Imperialism from Julius Evola, and he makes some interesting points that basically they shouldn't be separated, and we should go back to like traditionalism. And I just wonder, would it have all gone wrong with the separation of church and state? I mean, there is still like the expectation that as a politician or as a someone higher up in the government, that you're a good Christian. So the separation really isn't there, but yet it is.
I
there?
think there's kind of a separation, there's kind of not. It's somewhere in the middle. I think with church and state coming together, if we're going to do that, it depends on what religion. My answer is it depends on what religion we're fusing the state with, right? Like, there's certain religions I'd be okay with that. There's certain ones where I would run for the hills. So
Fair
it's
enough.
really a like, what religion are you wanting to fuse church and state with, right? Because some I think could work. I mean, one day maybe we'll get the dream pagan state again. Who knows? Probably not. I will wishfully think about it, but I mean,
So,
it's I don't know. Depends on who's in charge.
but
Because like there's certain denominations of Christianity that I'd really rather not, like people who like yell in tongues and play with snakes. Maybe we shouldn't give them,
oh yeah, the
governmental power.
the deep South Christians.
Yeah, maybe
Yeah,
not. But there's certain things where I think it could be beneficial. Just I don't know, it's complicated. And I think in the US we sort of have separation, but kind of not. It's like this it's a very weird, we're in a very, the US religious situation is a very complicated and strange one.
yeah. Because what I've been hearing a lot from paganism is that, like, it's not meant to be like a religion in the way that Christianity is, like, or Catholicism. We're never going to get like 1/3 of the the worldwide population to be pagan. It's always been more of a religion of the people in the country, the paganas, the people of the heath, of the hearth. And when Christianity came into into the Western world, came into pagan Europe, they settled into the big cities first, of course, because that's where all the power is located. So, would a pagan government, would that be an option? Would it be plausible, or are we gonna, just because I personally, I'm more of an anarchist. Like, I don't believe in any, like, I mean, I may change my mind with that, but at the moment, I just don't believe in any ruling class whatsoever. I believe very much in tribalism and just people helping each other, because that was Europe, that was Germania before the rise of Christianity, and that worked perfectly fine. I mean, yeah, of course, war, like inter-tribal warfare. I mean, we're still seeing that. It's just now nation against nation, not tribe against tribe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I think things would have to change for us to get a pagan government because we need a lot more pagans. That would be step one. We need a lot more people. And then we need a cultural shift to some extent. Um, but if it could happen, that would be very cool. I think it would be not in the near future, but maybe in the distant future. I mean, who knows? But it would be cool. I'm not entirely sure how it would look. I think it would look very different than what our current structure is, though, because it could go a
Yeah,
number of ways. The cards could fall a number of ways, but who knows? I mean, perhaps. I'll give that a perhaps.
because a lot of people are so focused on going back to the old times, going back to the old ways. And I mean, that's great. The old ways, they obviously worked, but the thing is, and I've been trying to find a way in that as well. It's not like we're not in the old days anymore. I mean, if it were the old days, this would have never been possible. So how do we adapt paganism? How do we adapt ourselves as pagans to the modern world? Like, the looking back is all fine and dandy, but we are supposed to be looking forward. How do you do that? How are you a modern pagan, if
Yeah,
you
this is the
will?
thing about the idea of turning back the clock, right? I think a lot of people romanticize the idea of just like turning it backwards. But the thing is, if we turn it backwards and do exactly what was done, we will end up in the current state. It ends up here. Like, that is how the arc of history went. And so if we want the world that we desire, what we need to do is take some of this tradition, take the parts that worked and the parts that like were effective and make sense, and fuse it with the parts of today that make sense, and cut the flack on both sides and create sort of this merged like master system. That would be ideal, because this is the thing, we can return to tradition but still keep like applying. You know what I mean? Like, I think that also, like, if we just turn the clock back, the same thing will happen. Like, if you do the exact same thing, you're going to get the exact same result. And so we need a kind of third path that I would say that's what would work. We take the old ways, we take what works, and we make it into sort of a neo situation. It's like a fusion, I think would make the most sense. Because there are things about modernity that do not work and need to be expunged, but there are things about the past that were not perfect either. I feel like to have complete rosy glasses is not always the most practical or effective, because once again, we don't want the same arc of history to happen again. We
No.
want a new arc, so we need to change things, right? And that's why I don't like framing things as just like turning the clock back, because I think that's an overly simplistic way of viewing things. And realistically, it probably wouldn't happen exactly how. We'd have to, I mean, I'm sure it could be done. We could literally just, like, I don't know, get rid of electricity and go back exactly how it was. But I think in reality, it would probably not fall that way. And we probably don't even really want it to fall that way. We'll say we do, but I don't know if people actually want that.
No, I honestly think that if modern man would go back to the dark ages, the times without electricity and central heating and whatever, like like you said, we're all saying that, oh, we want to go back to those times, but we have become so complacent with these things. Central heating, it's nice. Electricity, it's nice. It's easy. So to say you want to go back, sure, I get it, but that's not gonna work. I mean, you have the people who will, go on a, like, do those kind of things, but like only for a week, and then when they come back, it's it's like, okay, yeah, like that week was awesome, like back in nature, and I feel refreshed and all. But at the same time, I am kind of happy to have central heating again and like a normal roof over my head, and
Yeah.
so like that is indeed not the solution. And the reason why I ask this is because this is still a very big question in like in paganism, in pagan culture, because like all we really have is to look back at what our ancestors did, and like, of course, the first thing you're going to do is try and emulate that, but there are so many things that work against it. Like, we can't do like human sacrifices anymore, and it's
Yeah, maybe
some
we
things.
don't want to bring that back. There are a few things I'm like, we can kind of just leave that.
Yeah, no, exactly. And like like I said, I do believe in tribalism, and I think that's what a lot of people who are new into paganism, what they are looking for. They are looking for those groups. They are looking for for tribes. They are looking for their people, so to speak. And it's still, I was talking about that yesterday, there are still a lot of solo practitioners, but that is because there are just too little good groups, too little decent tribes. And I think maybe that is why a lot of people just they'll take on paganism for a while. They start looking, they start doing research, but all they find are those TikTok Vikings and those spiritual love and light people who just do that to, I don't know, sell you supplements or
Yeah.
whatever.
I wish I could get a little deeper into solitary practitioner stuff. It's after 2, so I kind of have to go. But yeah, I think a lot of people, finding a group is incredibly difficult. And finding a group that you actually like, agree with, and align with is even harder. I think that communities and organizations, that gets really complicated really fast. And I think a lot of people are solitary for a number of reasons. And I think that group is probably not going to go away anytime soon. But I got to
Nah.
get going. I'm so sorry. Thank you for having
Yeah,
me.
no, yeah, you're welcome. Do you want to plug your stuff real quick?
Yeah, I'm Georgina Rose. I go by Dot Darling on the internet. I'm on every platform. I'm on YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, Telegram, Instagram, all places. I host a podcast, the Postmodern Iconoclast, that is also on YouTube, and that is on every streaming podcast platform but Apple Podcasts. I'm not on Apple. I'm everywhere else, though. And thank you for having me on. This was really fun.
Yeah, it was. Thank you for coming on, and hope to talk to you again. We should definitely do this again when you have a little more time and I don't have the time zones mixed up.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Just shoot me a message and we'll make it happen.
Yes, will do. Will do. Thank you very much. This was the Greyhorn Pagans podcast with Miss Georgina Rose. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And until next time.